First Things First. I'm Sarah Cusack filling in for Jenna Wolfe. That's Chris Canty. That's Chris Broussard. And for Chris Carter and Nick Wright. How are you guys?
Doing good. We're going up on a Tuesday. Let's go.
I like it.
High energy.
Are you going to sing like you were doing in the hallways, the Tuesday song?
No, I'm not going to sing that. That's
you going to dance like you were dancing?
I have a voice for singing. I'm not that vocally inclined.
It sounded
Barry White. I would give you like a Barry White. No?
Barry White?
No? I wouldn't go that far.
I don't have that. Got to know your lane, Sarah. I always say a player that understands his limitations is a more effective player.
All right.
Just saying.
It didn't sound that bad.
I'm better at sports talk than I am about singing. We'll leave it at that.
We'll see. We'll see. Maybe hour two. All right, let's get going. As we start with the latest news on Ezekiel Elliott, tensions seem to be rising as the running backs holdout continues. Apparently, Jerry Jones's Zeke who joke didn't go over well. Yesterday, Zeke's agent told Chris Mortensen, "I didn't think it was funny, and neither did Zeke. We actually thought it was disrespectful." Canty, what's your reaction to this?
Well, when I first heard it, I didn't like it because right now, Ezekiel Elliott, the thing that he wants to do is be in training camp with his teammates. And so he feels like the negotiations with his contract is keeping him away from doing something that he loves. So for what he's done for that team over the past 3 years, it feels a little disrespectful for Jerry Jones to suggest that the team would be fine being status quo with Tony Pollard and not having Ezekiel Elliott. So when you make that kind of quip, I understand what Jerry was doing, trying to keep things lighthearted and maybe trying to apply a little more pressure throughout the negotiations on Zeke. But you got to know that Zeke and his camp is not going to take too kindly to that. And so I think that's the natural reaction that you would expect from the running back and from his agent, Rocky Arsenault.
Yeah, I'm with you. Look, Zeke, no matter how confident or cocksure you may appear to be, I mean, you're in Cabo, everything's cool, I'm not worried. You have to be worried. This is a 24-year-old kid, and money is on the line. He's not sure what type of contract he's going to get. The fact that he is holding out with 2 years left on his deal shows you he's very concerned about how much money he's going to be able to make in the next few seasons and for the rest of his career. So to hear a comment like that, look, he saw what happened to DeMarco Murray. Leads the league in rushing. They, didn't have nearly as much wear and tear on his body as Zeke has already, and they let him go. And Darren McFadden comes in and does pretty well. 28 years old, still got over 1,000 yards. And then to see Tony Pollard playing the way he is. I'm not saying he's going to replace Zeke, but still, he looks pretty good. All of that has to concern Zeke, and I think that's why he felt disrespected. And I'm going to say this. I don't think Jerry Jones is too bothered by the fact that Zeke feels disrespected. I think, like you said, it's a little negotiating. I think he meant it legitimately as a joke, but there was an underlying jab there because I think Jerry Jones feels disrespected. I think he feels like, first of all, you got 2 years left on your deal. Why are you holding out? Secondly, I have been there for you. I fought against the league for you. All the transgressions you've had off the field, I have supported you, and this is how you repay me. So I think there's a little disrespect on both sides, and that's why I think Jerry's probably not concerned that Zeke feels this way.
Yeah, the fact that Jerry Jones has had Zeke's back throughout all of the transgressions that he's had since he's been in the National Football League, that adds another layer onto the negotiations. But as you mentioned before, you can understand why Ezekiel Elliott feels like he needs to have urgency about getting paid. We all know that the running back position probably has the shortest shelf life in terms of top-end production at any position in the National Football League. So I understand why Zeke wants to get his money. You're talking about a guy that had 381 touches last year. So I get what he's talking about. He wants Todd Gurley money. He wants to be the top-paid running back in the National Football League. So, I mean, I don't think there's any question about what it's going to take in order to get Zeke back with the Dallas Cowboys. He's going to have to be the highest paid running back in the National Football League. I think the only question is how big of a gap is it between what he's getting paid and the number 2 guy, which would be Todd Gurley.
Who holds the leverage right now?
I think that right now the Cowboys have the leverage because this is not a Le'Veon Bell situation where Zeke can, hold out the entire season or till the 10th or 11th week or whatever. He can't go free. He can't be a free agent next year. So he has some leverage because he's so good and that offense is so much built around him. But like Jerry Jones has said maybe a week or two ago, the leverage is really going to show its face in the regular season. And I've said all along, I could be wrong, but I think this will go into the first few weeks of the regular season. If the Cowboys can win those early games and Tony Pollard and company can rush well, then I think Dallas has all the leverage and Zeke has to come back, maybe for Le'Veon Bell money. If they look bad, if they lose to the Giants, or even if they win, but their running game is terrible, then I think Dallas has to go to Zeke and then make him the highest paid running back in the league.
Well, that would be Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones playing a really dangerous game because although it's not murderer's row, the first 3 opponents that you start the season with, you still have 2 division games. And if you're trying to compete for a championship, the easiest way to get into the playoffs and give yourself an opportunity is by winning your division. So you open up with the Giants and then you got the Washington Redskins. I don't think the Dallas Cowboys can afford to stumble out of the gates because they do have a team that won a Super Bowl a couple of years ago in their same division, the talented Philadelphia Eagles. So, I mean, you need to try to be at full force if you can help it. The reality of this situation is Ezekiel Elliott has the opportunity to open up that contract under the collective bargaining agreement after your 3rd season, you can address the deal. So we can all agree that Ezekiel Elliott has outperformed the contract that he's on right now on his rookie deal. So I think everybody recognizes that he deserves to be paid. He's won the rushing title 2 of the first 3 years he's been in the National Football League, and he's arguably the best player on that Dallas Cowboys team. I think it's just a matter of making the numbers work so Jerry and Steven can take care of some of the other guys that want their money as well.
The term disrespectful was used, but Jerry Jones seems to be speaking about Dak and Amari in a different tone than he has with Zeke. Do you think that's changed the complexion of how Zeke is approaching this or the way he looks at it, given the way Jerry has kind of directed some of his comments amongst all of these 3 guys?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll address Jerry. I think the reason for that is the fact that they're in camp, they're practicing, and they don't have 2 years left on their deal. And so I think that is making Jerry feel more, better about them than it is about Zeke. And again, they haven't had the off-field transgressions that Zeke has had either. So all of that is coming into play. From Zeke's standpoint, of course, I mean, he's sitting there watching this, and it seems like every other day there's some slight, right? You don't need a league-leading rusher to win a Super Bowl, even though all of Jerry's Super Bowls had a league-leading rusher in Emmitt Smith, right? We're not going to set the market. Stephen Jones talking about analytics and, things like that. And, I mean, and then you come out and praise Dak. Yeah. The way he did. And we know Dak, as much as I like Dak, is not a top-tier quarterback. Ezekiel Elliott is a top-tier running back, if not the best running back in the league. So he has to be sitting back and feeling disrespect. I think all of that plays into it. It's not just the Zeke who comment. I think it was all the stuff you mentioned as well.
No, all of those things do factor in, but the other reality that you have to look at with these negotiations is out of the 3 guys that are angling for contracts right now, Amari Cooper, Dak Prescott, and Ezekiel Elliott, there's really only an argument to be made for one of those guys to be paid top of the market money. Like, Dak Prescott is not going to reset the marketplace. Russell Wilson will still be the highest paid quarterback in the National Football League after Dak's deal gets done. Same thing with Amari Cooper. He's not getting Michael Thomas money, $20 million a year. But Ezekiel Elliott, I mean, it's easy to say that when you look at these negotiations, he should eclipse what Todd Gurley is getting, that $14.375 million per year and $45 million in practical guarantees. He should eclipse all of those numbers. I think this is a much more difficult negotiation than those other 2 guys, just because you do have comparables where Dak should slot under, where Amari Cooper should slot under. I don't think you have that with Ezekiel Elliott.
But see, I don't think they're looking at it like that. I think, we talked about it yesterday, I think the Todd Gurley situation has hurt Zeke's position because Dallas is looking at it like, this is actually the same time they gave Gurley the contract. They didn't have to pay him early. They decided to, and now he's damaged goods, and you had a guy like C.J. Anderson get off the couch and fill in admirably for him. So I think Dallas is looking at that. I think they also considered the DeMarco Murray situation. Well, I mean, Murray had, 1,800 yards. And again, not nearly as much wear and tear as Zeke has already had, and they let him go. And so I think that I'm not sure they're going to make him the top paid running back.
I hear what you're saying, but just to push back a little bit, if Todd Gurley doesn't have the first 3 months of the season that he had last year, the Rams are probably not going to the Super Bowl. So if Jerry Jones is looking at it and saying, if I pay my running back If that means that I have an opportunity to be in the Super Bowl, I'm sure that the Dallas Cowboys. Well, listen, I'm sure that the Dallas Cowboys would sign up for the opportunity to get there.
But what are these next 4 years going to look like?
Well, it doesn't matter. You're just trying to compete for a championship the next 2 to 3 years. That's about the size of your window. So that's what they're trying to accomplish. They want to slot all of these deals in and see if they have room to take care of Byron Jones and Jalen Smith next offseason. But I think that Jerry Jones is just trying to keep this group of players together long enough to be able to compete for a championship. Windows open and close in the National Football League. I think the Dallas Cowboys are right in the middle of one. And this holdout is changing the timeline in terms of how they're going to address the other contracts, the other players that they're going to need in order to get the job done.
All right, we'll dig into this more later in the show. But coming up, is the Antonio Brown drama officially over? That's next on FS1. You can always check us out on Fox Sports Channel on Sirius XM. We'll be right back. We'll get to Antonio Brown in a second, but first, open gym basketball. James Harden, a move we've never seen before. One-footed sidestep three-pointer. He said he was working on a new move. This is it? We like it?
Best scorer ever.
Wow.
According to Daryl Morey.
I'm about to say, you on that train with Daryl Morey.
Okay.
He's a better offensive player than Michael Jordan.
I do not agree. I was just
you brought it up.
Making fun of Daryl Morey.
Up next, look at that. Cleveland Browns practice Odell Beckham Jr. One-handed, under the leg.
He's just special. I mean, that guy is just different. There's some guys, when you walk on the practice field and you know immediately that they're just different than everybody else, Odell Beckham Jr. is one of those guys. There's nothing athletically that he can't do at a high level.
That's awesome.
That's nasty.
But what would CC say? The gloves.
Stop it. Stop it. Don't be that guy.
No,
CC,
it's
don't be
awesome,
that
but
guy.
the gloves factor in a little bit. That's all I'm saying.
Monday Night Football, 49ers Broncos, Emmanuel Sanders, great catch down the field. Didn't count, but still a nice grab.
No, Joe Flacco made it a point to get Emmanuel Sanders involved early. They also had a little reverse, which he ran and converted for a first down. He looked good last night coming off of the Achilles injury. I'm surprised that he's back this early, but he looked good.
More from Monday Night Football, 49ers Kendrick Bourne, a nice double foot tap for the touchdown.
Jimmy Garoppolo didn't throw that.
No, Jimmy Garoppolo didn't look as good as the other two quarterbacks that played for the 49ers.
Sure didn't.
Yeah, Jimmy G was seeing ghosts. Just a little bit.
Preseason.
He was shook.
Yeah.
Sure.
Brad Chubb had something to do with that, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, on to Antonio Brown. After GM Mike Mayock's ultimatum, apparently AB is all in as the wideout returns to the Raiders for a meeting on Monday, but he's not letting go of the helmet situation, reportedly filing a new grievance with the league office. CB, is most of the AB drama over, or has it only just begun?
Oh, it's over. It's all kicks and giggles from this point on.
Oh.
Yeah, it's good.
Stop
Just get on the field and be good.
The level of sarcasm in your voice, your tone.
It's only just begun. It's not going to end, period. I mean, Antonio Brown loves attention. Witness the hot air balloon. He does it every year, right?
Yeah, he came in with the chopper last year to Pittsburgh Steelers training camp.
And that doesn't have to be a bad thing, but when you follow it up with a lot of the stuff that's gone on, it does look like a bad thing, like you want attention. I think he's only in Oakland for two reasons. One, the money, okay? He wasn't getting it in Pittsburgh. And two, for the attention, the drama. Even if they're winning games and we don't think they're going to be a playoff team, he's still, I mean, Pittsburgh was a team that had the chance to make the playoffs. And he wasn't happy. He was having a good year. Now, Juju Smith-Schuster was having a better year, but that led to some drama. You know, he wasn't happy, reportedly, that Smith-Schuster was the offensive MVP, and that's when he went AWOL from the team and so on and so forth. This is who Antonio Brown is. I hate to say it, the Facebook Live stuff. I mean, so you can't even say, oh, well, if we get him on the field, he plays well, and we're winning, and he's connecting with Derek Carr, he's going to be a good soldier. No, he might just tape you in the locker room and blast it all over for the world to see. So it's going to be plenty of drama. It's going to be great for us. It's going to be fun for us. But for the Raiders, this is going to be a problem. And this is what you signed up for when you gave him the $30 million guaranteed.
Well, yeah, and shame on Mike Mayock and Jon Gruden if they didn't know this was the guy that they were getting. Antonio Brown is a me guy. He's not a we guy. And you saw that last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, the fact that he no-show, no-called in Week 17 when the team is fighting for an opportunity to get into the playoffs, that lets you know it's all about him. It's not about the rest of the guys in the locker room. But But I guess the Oakland Raiders were willing to look past that because, number one, they do need some star power after they traded away Amari Cooper and they traded away Khalil Mack. Jon Gruden, although he is the face of the franchise right now, you need somebody on the field that fans can latch on to, that's going to sell jerseys, somebody that's an attraction. A coach on the headset ain't going to be that. But Antonio Brown is capable of being that, just looking at the numbers, what he's done the last 6 seasons, over 100 catches and 1,200 yards each of those years. So, I mean, Antonio Brown is from a production standpoint, as sure of a commodity that we have in the National Football League. So I think the Oakland Raiders are looking at him and saying he's going to help us sell tickets. He's going to help us transition to Las Vegas. He's also going to help us figure out whether or not we have a franchise quarterback. And I think those are critical questions that Jon Gruden has to answer. And that could be in part how you define whether or not the Jon Gruden era of the Oakland Raiders this time around is a success.
Yeah, answer that question for me, both of you. Is Jon Gruden's success in Oakland hinging on how things pan out with AB?
I think it is to a great degree because, one, you mentioned you got rid of Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper, guys that not only were great players, not only were young, but especially Mack were good character guys and good locker room guys. And then you bring in a guy who is a great player, but the opposite of those guys in the locker room. So that's number one. Number two, you've got a lot of young players watching Antonio Brown, seeing what he's getting away with. And that can affect your culture if you don't handle it properly. So I think even if they get rid of AB, but things don't, other players look at his example and begin to act that way. Remember, when they traded Khalil Mack, players did come out and say, when we saw they could trade Khalil, all of us knew we were expendable. Mm-hmm. So why aren't they looking at Antonio and saying, if he can get away with that, then maybe I can do the same thing if I work hard on the field, mm-hmm. which is what Antonio does. So I think there's that. I also think with Jon Gruden, look, this is now had his last 7 years since he won that Super Bowl in 2002. His last 7 years, he's made the playoffs twice. He's won 0 playoff games. And when he won the Super Bowl, taking nothing away from him, but those were Tony Dungy's guys. Wow. Right? So when he had to put the team together kind of himself, they haven't won a playoff game since. And so far in Oakland, it doesn't look like he really knows how to put together a winning team. So, yeah, I think a lot of this for Gruden is going to hinge on AB.
Yeah, you can't take the ring off of Gruden's resume, although I do lean toward agreeing with you about those Tampa Bay Buccaneers teams. But in looking at his tenure as the head coach of the Raiders this time around, for me, if you're going to judge it based on him winning a Super Bowl, then, yeah, he's going to be a failure in his second stint with this team. But if you're talking about making sure the franchise transitions successfully to Las Vegas, that they do have a competitive product on the field once they get into that new stadium, then I think there is an opportunity for him to have success. But a lot of that is going to hinge on how he handles AB. And you saw he was walking on eggshells a little bit throughout this whole helmet fiasco, trying to support Antonio Brown, put a positive face on it, letting him know that they care about him, that they love him. AB is one of those guys that's a high-maintenance player. We saw that in Pittsburgh. You saw how Mike Tomlin tried to handle that situation. But ultimately, when you empower a player by giving him that kind of money, you're only going to see more of his personality. And unfortunately, with Antonio Brown, it hasn't been a personality that lends itself to the team doing a lot of winning.
Does it make a difference to you, though, that he did show back up at camp? I mean, what Mayock said, we heard Drew Rosenhaus say that they didn't feel like they exhausted all options. So file another grievance, that's maybe their last option. And now that he is back with the team, at least?
It's like Chris Rock said, I'm not going to give you the credit as a father just for being there. Mm-hmm. That's you're supposed to be there, all right? Antonio Brown, you're supposed to be there. We said it yesterday. We'll talk about this helmet situation and all that. I get you're upset about it. I get you're filing grievances. That's your right. But in the meantime, you still can be with your team. You can put on a helmet. You need to get used to another helmet just in case you aren't able to wear your old one anyway. So you can be there working out with the team. So I'm not going to give him credit for that. I also think there's a little bit of fear. I think Drew Rosenhaus, his agent, they saw people starting to write about the 5-day letter, the dreaded 5-day letter, where they could have him not playing this entire season and not getting paid, maybe more importantly. So I think all of that lended to Antonio being there yesterday.
Well, let me say this real quickly. I'm not trying to defend Antonio Brown, but it does feel like the NFL is moving the goal line a little bit with this helmet thing, because Antonio Brown did find a shut air advantage helmet that was made within the 10-year window. And ultimately, you're saying that the NFL should approve that and certify it for use on the football field. It's not one of the helmets that they had banned in 2018. They just discontinued the use of those helmets once they're outside of that 10-year window. AB found that helmet, and the NFL said he still couldn't use it. So I do believe, in part, this is the NFL trying to draw a line in the sand and saying you need to transition to one of the helmets that has the new technology. Just AB is resistant to that. Ultimately, if the NFL wants something, they're usually going to win, but it feels like AB is going to try to play out the string as long as possible. I don't have an issue with it as a player as long as it's preseason. But once the regular season hits, AB needs to quit it with the distractions, because this is something that could be detrimental, especially when you're talking about a young group of guys in that locker room.
All right, coming up, are the Rams going to be able to avoid a Super Bowl hangover? We'll discuss that next on First Things First. Preseason football continues Thursday on Fox as Leonard Fournette and Nick Foles make their preseason debuts for Jacksonville against Kenny Stills and the Dolphins. You can catch the action starting at 8 Eastern on Fox and the Fox Sports app. It's time now for us to go viral. Gregg Popovich has his hands full trying to coach Team USA to a gold medal, and if one more player drops out, Coach Pop might have to suit up himself. Take a listen. Donovan Mitchell narrate Pop showcasing his skills.
Oh, okay. Okay. Cash. Uh-oh. At guard. 6'1" from Serbia.
You guys ready to be here?
Pop was a good player back in his day, though.
You could tell. You could tell.
He knows what
Well,
he's
still
doing.
got a little bit of game, too.
Yeah.
It's like that old guy in the gym that comes in with the elbow pads and the knee pads. He's got that low post
Short
game.
shorts.
He's throwing elbows.
He's someone that would hustle you,
Smart.
make you think you can't really move
Yep.
anymore.
Yep.
No, good stuff, good stuff. All right, time for some stories to start your morning. Zion Williamson was drafted #1 this summer and received the largest shoe deal for a rookie since LeBron James. However, some of his peers aren't buying the hype. In the NBA's annual rookie survey, only 5% of players said Zion would have the best career, tying him for 4th. His Duke teammate, Cam Reddish, received the most votes at 19%. So, CB, what do you make of this?
This was major disrespect. Now, I don't think they were throwing shade like we don't like Zion. They just apparently don't think a ton of his game. I mean, because not only was he behind Cam Reddish, then Ja Morant, he was behind DeAndre Hunter, who's going to Atlanta, I think the 11th pick.
Yep.
So, and then he was tied for 4th with several other players. So this is, these players are showing you we don't think Zion's going to be that great. So we'll have to wait and see.
Usually I say game recognizes game, but it's hard for me to put a whole lot of stock into what the rookies are saying, because I saw Zion Williamson at Duke last year. And you also got to keep in mind that the rookies in 2018 voted Wendell Carter to have the most successful NBA career. I don't think any of those guys to a man would look at it now and say that he's going to be better than Luka Doncic or Trae Young.
No question.
All right, on to the NFL. Zeke reportedly felt disrespected when Jerry Jones jokingly said Zeke who over the weekend. According to his agent, Zeke is also reportedly still training in Cabo. So, Canty, how much longer do you think this holdout will last?
Well, I think they'll get it taken care of before we kick off the regular season, before week 1 when they host the New York Giants. I mean, it's still preseason, and Ezekiel Elliott is a running back. You're talking about, of all the positions on the football field, it's probably the easiest for the running back to get into the flow of things. I understand that they're transitioning to a new offensive coordinator, but they're still going to execute some of the same concepts in the passing game and the running game. So I think that this deal gets done in time for the regular season.
I think it'll go into the 1st or 2nd week of the regular season. I think the Cowboys are looking at this as, hey, this is giving us a chance to see Tony Pollard and these other guys, what they can do. You mentioned the new offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore. I think they want to see with that offense and the new wrinkles in that, can we survive? Can we have a good running game and passing game without Zeke? And then if we do, he'll have to come back and take our lesser offer. So I think it goes into the season, 1st or 2nd week.
All right, to some on-field action. 49ers Broncos Jimmy Garoppolo played last night for the first time since tearing his ACL last season. And he struggled mightily, going 1 for 6 for 0 yards and an interception. So, Canty, is this a sign of things to come for Jimmy G?
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned just because you're going through that ACL reconstruction, that rehab process. You don't know where a player is at mentally. When I looked at him in the pocket yesterday against the Denver Broncos, he just did not look comfortable. And this is coming off the report late last week that in joint practices he threw 5 consecutive interceptions. I can see why. I mean, yesterday when he threw that first pick, that was the classic chuck and duck situation. Like, he just doesn't look comfortable. And in order for this San Francisco 49ers team to take that next step, to make the jump, they're going to need a healthy and productive Jimmy Garoppolo. And right now, it doesn't look like he's on the way to being that.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, the practice report, you know, you kind of blew it off. Okay, it's just practice. Then you saw last night, I mean, not only the interception, he was lucky there wasn't another pick six on that. And then he threw it into the line of scrimmage twice, you know, tip ball. So he struggled. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, and here's why. His first game last year, he came out, didn't play well. His next 2 before he got hurt, he really looked good in those last 2 games. I believe it was Detroit and Kansas City. So I think he'll, you know, wear off the rust and go ahead and play well. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt right now.
You got a lot of confidence.
I'm concerned, but I'm not jumping off the Jimmy G bandwagon.
On to another quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. He was expected to play in week 2 of the preseason, but sat out due to back tightness. However, the team is reportedly planning for Rodgers to play on Thursday in Canada against the Raiders. So, Canty, do you think that we need to see Rodgers there in this new Matt LaFleur offense before the season starts?
Well, I'm sure that Matt LaFleur and the coaching staff of the Packers want to see him out there, but I have full confidence in Aaron Rodgers. I know firsthand what he can do on a football field, so I'm not concerned whether or not he'll be ready in week 1 if he doesn't play in the preseason. But I do think that they want to see him in that new offense. They want to have him get into the flow of how they actually call the games, the sequence of plays. So I guess there is some value for Matt LaFleur in that regard. But in terms of needing to see Aaron Rodgers play in the preseason, I don't have to see it to have confidence that he'll be good in the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, if they were going to play him a whole half, I think there'd be some value in it somewhat. But then a lot of it depends on what the defense is showing you. Like, how much of their new offense are they really going to show in a preseason game? And how much is the defense going to show you? Rodgers himself has said, I'm getting more out of our practices where our defensive team is throwing a lot of different looks at me and all of that. So I'm getting more out of that. The good news is it does seem like he's got more of an understanding and maybe a buy-in to what LaFleur wants to do. And if that's the case, I think he could have a huge season.
All right, to the Pats. Yesterday, Tom Brady's favorite target, Julian Edelman, was removed from the non-football injury list. Edelman fractured his thumb in July, but is ready to go. So in the past few days, Brady has gotten back Edelman and Josh Gordon. So, Canty, do you think the Patriots have enough offense to compete for their 7th Super Bowl?
Well, yeah, they're going to have enough offense. I mean, the last 3 years, they've been in the top 10 in scoring offense in the National Football League. So I have no doubt that Tom Brady and Bill Belichick will be able to manufacture offense and score some points. Now, it looks different from year to year based on the talent that Bill Belichick has available to him on that roster. But when you have Tom Brady and you have Julian Edelman, his favorite target, that offense has the opportunity to continue to move the ball down the field, convert in critical situations, being able to get first downs, being able to get into the red zone and be efficient in that area. So this offense with Tom Brady is always going to be a prolific offense. It just looks different. But when you have Julian Edelman, the guy that's led the team in receiving 2 out of the last 3 years, I think they'll be in good shape.
Yeah, I like what you said about looking different because, you know, we've seen the Patriots adjust from game to game, you know, what their focus is. And now they've had all offseason to understand we aren't going to be as strong as we've been at tight end. You know, but if they're healthy and Josh Gordon is able to stay around the entire season, which I know is a big if, then I think they will be more of their receivers will be a part of the passing game with Josh Gordon, N'Keal Harry, and then Julian Edelman, as you mentioned. And they'll obviously focus on the running game with Sony Michel, who I think is going to be a huge part of their offense, both catching passes out of the backfield and running the ball. So I think it'll look a lot different than it has in the past few years with Gronk there, but I still think it's going to be greatly effective.
When you look at Josh Gordon, how do you approach that if you're trying to figure out exactly what you're going to get out of him, the security of him being there throughout the duration of the season?
Well, I think the Patriots are doing the right thing by wrapping their arms around him. If you hear the players talking to the media in the different sound bites, everybody's talking about how much they love Josh Gordon. And when there's something that a player is dealing with in their personal life with Josh, it's the substance abuse. it feels good to have those guys in the locker room come out and support you. So I think that they're doing the right thing from that standpoint. As far as Bill Belichick is concerned, I think he understands the reality of the situation. You can't base what you're going to do offensively on Josh Gordon and potentially having him for the entire season. If he's there, great. I'm sure they'll find ways to incorporate him. But one of the things that I noticed last year when Josh Gordon was on the field for the Patriots, Tom Brady trusts him a whole lot.
Right.
I mean, Tom Brady was throwing it up to him in one-on-one coverage, 50-50 balls, and Josh Gordon typically, had a great opportunity to be able to come down with it. You don't see Tom Brady trust new guys to that team that quickly. And so I think that is a positive in terms of looking at Josh Gordon coming back to the team this year. Wide receiver was a position coming into this offseason. We said the Patriots had to figure out some answers. They invested a first-round draft pick in N'Keal Harry. He's been banged up during training camp. But, I mean, if you're talking about getting a healthy Josh Gordon in the right mental headspace, then I feel good about what this offense potentially can be because he adds another element.
No question.
I mean, from a physical talent standpoint, there are very few wide receivers out there that are going to rival what Josh Gordon brings to the table. So if Bill Belichick and Tom Brady have him at their disposal, then I think you're talking about a guy that they can create some mismatches with, some favorable looks with.
Yeah, I think Brady looked at it like, man, I haven't had anything close to this since Randy Moss. He really, I mean, you said
he's that kind of talent.
Right, and he went to Gordon. And I think, look, there's not a better place he could be. I don't feel like there's a better team he could be with his situation. But there's no guarantee. And as you said, Belichick knows this. And we're going to use him while we have him. And hopefully everything will work out. We'll do what we can off the field. I think Brady's showing confidence in him, being friendly off the field with him. They seem to have a pretty good relationship. And also showing that confidence in him on the field. That could be motivation for Josh to stay on the straight and narrow, if you will. Now, I felt the same way last year.
Yep.
Things were going great, and then all of a sudden we saw what happened. So Belichick understands it. That's why, let's face it, that's why they drafted Harry.
Yeah.
They understand they need that type of playmaker at that position. So hopefully Josh will be around, though, because I think he could be great, and it certainly will help the Patriots.
Real quick, another thing that's important to note, the NFL has a new commitment to mental health, and they've got a mental health professional in all the buildings of all 32 clubs. So that's important. Maybe that'll help Josh Gordon.
That's valuable.
Hey, it's Nick Wright, and hiring is challenging, but there's one place you can go where hiring is simple, fast, and smart. A place where growing businesses connect to qualified candidates. That place is, of course, ZipRecruiter.com/approach. ZipRecruiter sends your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards, but they don't stop there. With their powerful matching technology, ZipRecruiter scans thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience and invites them to apply to your job. As applications come in, ZipRecruiter analyzes each one and spotlights the top candidates so you never miss a great match. And right now, our listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/approach. That's ZipRecruiter.com/APPROACH. ZipRecruiter.com/approach. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
All right, on to the Rams. They scored just 3 points in their Super Bowl loss to the Patriots, but the team is hoping to bounce back strongly and get back to Super Bowl 54 this season. New Rams linebacker Clay Matthews thinks the team will be fine, saying, quote, I mean, when you lose, is there still a hangover? There's just a level of talent that we should be able to put something together and do something special. I can't speak on behalf of any hangover or curse or whatever you call it, but this team looks primed and ready to make another run. So, Canty, are you buying that the Rams won't have a Super Bowl hangover?
8-Ball says doubtful. I think the Rams will have a Super Bowl hangover, and a big part of that is Todd Gurley and the question marks surrounding his health. Like, I can't ignore what I saw in December and on into the postseason. He was a shell of himself. When C.J. Anderson, a guy off the street, becomes your most reliable option in the backfield in terms of running the football, then you've got serious problems. I mean, a part of the way that Sean McVay operates his offense is he has a lot of passing concepts that are predicated off of play action. I mean, that's why Jared Goff is under center as much as he is. And when you don't have the threat of having a dynamic running back like Todd Gurley in the backfield, that hurts your team's chances of being able to get back to the big game. The other part about this that's important to note is the fact that a lot of teams in the National Football League haven't been able to do it. You're only talking about 2 teams that have been able to come off of a Super Bowl loss and then come back the very next season and win the Super Bowl. That's the 72 Miami Dolphins when they went undefeated, 17-0, and then, of course, the 2018 New England Patriots. Remember, they lost to the Philadelphia Eagles. They ran it back and beat the Rams. So, I mean, not a lot of teams have done it. Not a lot of teams actually even get back after they lose a Super Bowl. Only 3 teams have done it: the Buffalo Bills, the Denver Broncos, and the Minnesota Vikings. So, there's so much parity in the National Football League. It's so hard to repeat that level of success. I think that the Rams have a lot of things working against them in terms of being able to get back to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I hear you. And I don't think a hangover would be not getting back to the Super Bowl. Because I'm with you. I don't expect them to get back to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I picked them to win the division over Seattle, but with some hesitation because I do think there could be a hangover. But I think if they make the playoffs, and obviously they're not going to be satisfied with it, but if they make the playoffs, have a decent season, that to me would say there was not a hangover. Mm-hmm. A hangover to me is missing the playoffs. And that's when you have to question, okay, where's this team going in the future? Now, there are 2 things, despite my reservations, two individuals that I'm confident in, and obviously you got Aaron Donald on the defense anchoring that. But Darrell Henderson, the rookie running back, okay, out of Memphis. Now, we've talked about Tony Pollard and all that. Tony Pollard averaged less than 6 carries a game last year at Memphis. Why? Because of Darrell Henderson. Darrell Henderson was the bell cow with Memphis. They drafted him in the 3rd round. Obviously, they understand they got some question marks with Gurley. Can Henderson come in with Gurley playing, part-time, 60% of the snaps or whatever? Can Henderson come in and be the type of back that can, where you got Gurley at 75, 80%, and then Henderson can help the rest of the way, and maybe together they're the old Todd Gurley, something like that. So if we like Pollard, then I think you have to like Henderson. That's the first thing. Secondly is Sean McVay. I do think he's a great coach. He's kind of proven that already, even though he hadn't won the Super Bowl. But he was schooled by Bill Belichick in the Super Bowl, and he knows it. Mm-hmm. He's admitted it. So I think he's going to come back. I think he's been in the lab. I think he's been trying to figure everything out, learning from his mistakes. So I do think McVay is going to come back and be an even better coach. So I think that at least can get them into the playoffs.
Bill Belichick is one thing, but do you think the entire league will make adjustments to Sean McVay, what they've seen, and just his approach to the game and ways in which they can start to combat that and try and figure that out throughout the course of the entire season?
I think we saw the league start to make adjustments toward the end of last year. You're talking about the second half of the season and then on into the playoffs, because that Rams offense wasn't nearly as explosive. Now, I mean, you can pinpoint a lot of that on Todd Gurley and his health situation, but I think also the league has a better understanding of what Sean McVay is trying to do, some of the concepts that they're trying to execute, and some of the things that they're trying to take advantage of with opposing defenses. Coming into this year, I think it's important that Sean McVay help Jared Goff get on track in terms of being able to take that next step to become a top half of the league quarterback. I think the jury's still out on what Jared Goff is going to potentially be. That's why the Rams and Les Snead aren't in a hurry to pay him. Remember, Carson Wentz is in the same draft class as Jared Goff, and he just got his money from Howie Roseman and the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that the Rams are taking a wait-and-see approach with Jared Goff, just because I think they want to find out whether or not he's a guy that's capable of elevating the play of everybody around him. Now, I think that Sean McVay can help him and add a little more variety to that offense. They spend a lot of their time in 11 personnel. That's 1 running back, 1 tight end, and 3 wide receivers. I think they need to change it up, give the defense more variation in terms of personnel groupings and formations. That'll hold those guys a little bit off balance and make things a little bit easier for Jared Goff. They've got to try to figure out a way to give Jared Goff more answers in real time. Another one of those things that we saw late in the season, defenses disguising their looks. Jared Goff and Sean McVay use that coach-to-quarterback headset communication when he's at the line of scrimmage, and Sean McVay's telling him what he sees and trying to tell Jared Goff where to go with the football based on the looks. I think that Sean McVay has got to do a better job of coaching Jared Goff off, so he has those answers without that. Because defenses are going to adjust, defenses are going to disguise, and after he snaps that ball, he needs to understand what he's looking at in order to get the football in the hands of the right playmakers.
Hopefully Cooper Kupp being back may help a little bit.
That should help, too.
Yeah, nice.
All right, coming up, have we seen the end of Zeke in Dallas after he felt disrespected by Jerry Jones? That's ahead on First Things First. We are back here on First Things First with New York Daily News NFL reporter Pat Leonard. Pat, we're thrilled you're here with us. We're glad we're getting all the dirt on Canty as a player.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All the good stories.
Yeah, covered him back in 2012.
Yeah, Pat's my guy, man. The go-to for New York sports media. If you want to have the inside scoop, go to Pat Leonard.
I appreciate that.
My man.
I like it. Is
Now,
that
you
why?
know, because you're on this show now, you got to come on my radio show later, right?
I'll bring it there,
you know, that's
too.
a part of it, okay?
I'll bring it, yeah. That's part of the deal.
We're going to
All
deal
right.
with all this after the show. First, we are going to talk some Giants. Rookie quarterback Daniel Jones has looked good in the preseason. However, the team is hopeful that he can sit back and learn behind Eli Manning this season. Owner John Mara said that it was his hope that Eli Manning starts the whole season. And when Giants head coach Pat Shurmur was asked about it Friday, he echoed the same sentiment.
John owns the team, right? And we're on the same page. You know, there's really not much more to say. And I think I've been saying that all along. I just get a sense once in a while that when I answer those questions, nobody believes me. Well, you heard it from the owner.
All right, Pat, now you're around this team all of the time. So when do you think that Daniel Jones will eventually take over for Eli?
Sarah, I think the Giants open at Dallas, right? They open against the Cowboys. Everyone at AT&T Stadium should get their cameras out and take their pictures because that is the last time Eli Manning will start against the Dallas Cowboys. They play them in week 9. They play, yeah, good morning, everybody. Good morning. They play Dallas in week 9, and by that time, Daniel Jones will be in. Pat Shurmur and John Mara are on the same page in this sense. They both want to start Eli Manning in week 1, and they both want to win this season. But Shurmur is more realistic, I think, about what the Giants are this year than the owner, John Mara, is. And I firmly believe that Pat Shurmur is going to go to John Mara earlier than the owner would prefer or envisions with this decision. Because the fact is this, Pat Shurmur's on his second head coaching job. Did you know this? He needs to win 8 of his first 12 games to match Ben McAdoo's win total the day he got fired. And that was in the middle of his second season. Pat Shurmur can't be patient here. Not to mention he, Dave Gettleman, and Mike Shula, okay, the offensive coordinator. I call him Margaritaville. He's so laid back. He lights up like a firecracker when you talk about Daniel Jones. And back in May, Mike Shula told all of us, not just me, told all of us that if this were a different situation, Daniel Jones would be ready to start in week 1. Now, that's in May. We now have had training camp going on for several weeks. We have now all seen this kid throw a good deep ball. I'll be the first one to admit I didn't like the pick at number 6, but I also want the kid to succeed. He deserves every right. And frankly, you've missed the playoffs 6 of the last 7 years, and Pat Shurmur can't afford to lose this coaching job going out, being the good employee, just playing Eli Manning just because they want his career to end the right way. We want it to end the right way, but the priority, and John Mara will tell you this too, and you know this, Chris, is to win games. And if it's clear early that they're losing because of their offense and because of Eli, they're going to go to Daniel Jones quickly. And for predictions, if you're putting money down in Vegas right now, week 3 at Tampa Bay. That's what I'm telling you.
Yeah,
right.
I like where you're headed because I want to see Daniel Jones, as great as Eli's career has been and all that. But looking at their schedule, you got Dallas, which you would think would be a loss, okay? But then you got Buffalo, Tampa Bay, Washington, and Minnesota. At least 3 of the first 4. I mean, you think you can play with Buffalo, Tampa Bay, and Washington. So if, like you said, if they're losing those games because Eli can't move the football, I think it's in that window or right after that you go to Daniel Jones. The season looks like we're not going to be a playoff team. We're not going to be that great. Let's make it all about developing this next quarterback we have, and that's when I think he'll move in there.
Well, here's what I'll say. I think the Giants have a midseason game up in Foxborough against the New England Patriots, and then they come back home against the Arizona Cardinals. So you're talking about a Thursday night game up in Foxborough and then 10 days to prepare before your next home game against subpar competition because we don't think the Cardinals will be very good this season. I think that's a soft place to land. Another natural point in the schedule for Daniel Jones to take over is after the bye week, week 12 up in Chicago. I think that makes a sense. He would have about a third of the season, 6 games to play. I think that's a good enough sample size for him to get the requisite experience that you would want your starter to have going into year 2. But in terms of what you mentioned about Pat Shurmur, I mean, Pat Shurmur is on the hot seat this season. I mean, Vegas released the odds for coaches to be fired this upcoming season. At the top of that list was Jay Gruden. Number 2 was Pat Shurmur. So, I mean, you have to understand ownership is embarrassed about what's happened the last couple of years, having an 8-24 record. And like it or not, Pat Shurmur is a part of that. So you're talking about a coach that wants to win as many football games as possible. The one thing that you have to be concerned with a little bit is how the organization is going to handle the Eli Manning farewell tour. Because I think that there are some people in that organization that want to give Eli Manning every opportunity to go out the right way, to go out as the starting quarterback, and to have only played for the New York Giants. But I think that when you're looking at this team, realistically, it's going to be hard for the Giants to be very competitive. It's not a very talented roster, especially on the defensive side of the ball, a lot of new faces. So I don't necessarily see the Giants competing for a playoff spot. If you're not competing for a playoff spot, if you're losing games, you might as well lose while having the benefit of your young quarterback getting the on-the-job training. That's why I think there's a little bit of conflict in the organization in terms of when would be the right time for Daniel Jones to take over.
You make a good point, too, about Week 6 at New England. The NFL, this is their 100th season, landmark season. They have games earmarked to celebrate that. I think everyone in the NFL, or I could tell you everyone in the NFL, plus the Giants, wants Eli to get to that game. One last head-to-head with Tom Brady, the guy who can't beat him in the Super Bowl, but basically beats everybody else. So I think the league wants Eli to get there. But also, Week 7, if that's Daniel Jones, if he gets to Week 6 and that's Daniel Jones versus Kyler Murray. And then a few weeks later, Daniel Jones versus Sam Darnold. That's great TV. That puts fans in the seats. It's not only about winning. It's about putting fans in the seats. But this is the thing. Going back to Shurmur, in 2004, when they went to Kurt Warner, they were 5-4. And what worried me about what John Mara said recently was that if they're 5-4, you can tell by what the owner's saying, they're not going to do it. And I think that's absurd, but that's what, going back to my point, I think Pat Shurmur will. And I don't think they're going to be 5-4 after 9 games.
Well, Pat Shurmur won't have a choice if John Mara doesn't want to turn it over to Daniel Jones.
That's true.
I don't think this was a coaching decision. This is going to be an ownership decision, and it's a different attachment that the organization has to Eli Manning as opposed to Kurt Warner. Because Kurt Warner didn't win any Super Bowl trophies for the New York Giants. Eli Manning has won 2. So I think that there's a different dynamic when it comes to how they're going to go about replacing Eli Manning or having the successor for Eli Manning step in and take the starting quarterback job.
Yeah, I think, look, if they're, your scenario, if they're 5-4, that means Manning has to be playing well. You mentioned how young the defense is. The receiving core is going to be depleted early in the season. Manning will have been playing great football if they're 5-4, and I think they would stick with him at that point. I think whenever it's evident that they're not making the playoffs, and again, I mentioned the first, 4 games. If they lose all 4 of those and Manning can't move the football, at that point you understand at some point we got to get Jones in. But as long as they're in the playoff hunt and look like they have a chance, I think they'll stay with Manning.
For John Mara, do you think there's any residue from the McAdoo starting Geno Smith situation from a couple of years ago that he's still thinking about and looking at?
No question, Sarah. I'm so glad you brought that up, too, because that is the full context of this. And Cris alluded to it. That wasn't just Ben McAdoo and Jerry Reese, even though they were fired for it. John Mara, and I talked to him about this the year after. He has taken full blame, in hindsight, for signing off on that, signing off on the plan. At first, it sounded like McAdoo went a little rogue. And he did present it to Eli Manning a little differently than they talked about it, which is why Eli was more offended than he should have been. But John Mara signed off on it, so he orchestrated it. He was the one behind the plan that went so wrong, so he wants to personally get it so right. John resents, and he's told us this directly, he's told me this directly, he resents the suggestion that his emotion is getting in the way here because he doesn't want people to think he doesn't want to win. It's not about Eli over winning, but no one's saying that. Everybody knows John Mara wants the Giants to win. They've won 2 Super Bowls fairly recently, as you're aware. And John Mara believes, though, that they can still win again with Eli Manning, but there aren't many people who believe that anymore, and he needs to let go.
That sounds like emotion to me. Well, the fact that he thinks Eli can get it done.
Yeah, I think it's perpetual mediocrity if you're trying to do 2 things at one time. I mean, if you're trying to make a playoff push with Eli Manning as your quarterback, then you make all the decisions in that offseason to try to support that. If that was the main objective, then you're not using the number 6 overall pick on a quarterback. But the fact that they decided that they were going to Daniel Jones, to me, signals that the organization is trying to rebuild. If you're going to rebuild, then of course Daniel Jones is going to be your future. You make all the decisions this upcoming season to support that, and that means that you're trying to get this kid as much experience as you possibly can in meaningful games.
All right, Pat, stay right where you're at. We're not letting you go yet.
Will do.
Is Zeke right to feel disrespected by Jerry Jones? That's next on First Things First. Back here with Pat Leonard, and we are going viral. Check out Giants Rookie of the Year, Saquon Barkley, showcasing insane footwork and elusiveness. Pat, should Saquon be on people's MVP radar this season?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's the focal point of the Giants offense. He had 352 touches last season. He's probably going to eclipse 400 this year. This just reminds me, this clip watching of his trainer, Burt Wiggum from Tom Shaw before the draft, told me he was a unicorn. And he said he trained Marquise Pouncey, Justin Houston, Bruce Irvin. The only other guy he's ever seen close to as a physical freak as Saquon is Khalil Mack. But he can do things that no one else can do that he's seen. And that he's trained with Ryan Flaherty with Nike in July. And they worked a lot on movement patterns, trying to keep him safer, injury risk, things of that nature. So you can see, even when he's running drills, he's something different.
Yeah, the only thing that I worry about with Saquon Barkley is whether or not he's going to stay healthy. But the guy is a freak of nature. I mean, look at what he's doing right there, hurdling that safety from the Chicago Bears. Like, it's unbelievable. And that's Adrian Amos, who's a pretty good safety, and he's jumping over that. That's a 230-pound man that's doing that. Saquon Barkley's special. I understand why Dave Gettleman said he was touched by the hand of God. The kid is special.
He's going to need all that elusiveness, too, for this year. They're going to stack the box. Unless Eli turns back the clock about 7 years, 8 years.
Exactly.
Well, listen, the offensive line is better. They did trade for Kevin Zeitler, and they signed Mike Remmers, right tackle, in free agency. So the offensive line should be better. That should help Saquon a little bit.
We've reached our Giants quota.
Done.
Moving on to another Pro Bowl running back in Ezekiel Elliott. Apparently, Jerry Jones' Zeke who joke didn't go over well. Yesterday, Zeke's agent told Chris Mortensen, "I didn't think it was funny, and neither did Zeke. We actually thought it was disrespectful." So, Pat, how long will Elliott's holdout last?
I think they'll sign him before week 1. And this is the reason. This is the Dallas Cowboys' best chance at a Super Bowl since the mid-90s. I mean, I'm on team Dez caught it, but this is their best chance since the mid-90s. And are you telling me Jerry Jones is willing to make himself the reason that they don't win this year when they have this window, they have this great defense? You can't have the reason that you don't win the NFC East this year and you don't go on to win, that you just didn't want to give Zeke a couple extra dollars. Not to mention, I think Jones looks horrible right now because he's trying to use Le'Veon Bell's contract as the metric for Zeke. Le'Veon Bell has nothing to do with Ezekiel Elliott. He sat out an entire season, so no one knows he's going to come back and he's going to get hurt in week 1 because his body might not be ready. Number 2, his teammates in Pittsburgh basically slammed the door behind him on the way out. So this has nothing to do. His value is much closer to what Todd Gurley's would be. They should be giving him at least a 4-year, $60 million deal. And I don't think it's going to last because I know you could make the argument their schedule's a little weaker early, and so maybe you can win some games and create some leverage there. But, Chris, you know this. NFL teams don't think like that. They don't think like, hey, maybe if we lose a couple games early but we get what we need on the financial front, we still have a good enough team. No. They need to come out of the gate and win now. They have Travis Frederick back at center, and they can't waste their window.
I completely agree with you, Pat. I mean, I don't think Jerry Jones is going to haggle over, the salary. We already know what it's going to be. You just mentioned it, 4 years, $60 million. That's $15 million a year. That would eclipse what Todd Gurley is getting on average annual value. So we know what the numbers should be. He's going to be the top of the market running back. There's no question about it. To let this bleed over into the regular season, especially when you come out of the gates with 2 division games, I don't see Jerry Jones doing that. The reason why I bring up the division opponents, even though I don't think that both of those teams, the Giants or the Redskins, will be very competitive this year, I don't think the Cowboys can afford a slip-up because division games, they almost count like 2. Because that's 1 win in the win column from you. That raises you up in the standings, but you also supplant somebody else. The easiest path to getting into the playoffs is being able to win your division. And the Dallas Cowboys are going to have competition with the Philadelphia Eagles. So that's why I don't think you can afford, if you're Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones, to allow this to bleed over into the regular season. So I think they have to get this deal done because, like Pat said, I think this is Jerry Jones' best shot at a winner since he had those championship teams in the 90s.
I hear you guys. I hope you're right because I think Ezekiel's the best running back in the league. I've been saying that for a month or 2 now. But I also think the Cowboys, look, Jerry Jones has only given second contracts to 2 running backs he's ever drafted, Emmitt Smith. And we saw how it worked with Emmitt Smith. The other one's Marion Barber. Yeah. But he did this with Emmitt Smith. He went into the first 2 games of the season. They lost those games, and he goes back and gives Emmitt what he wants. I don't think they're looking at these first few games like, if we lose them, it's okay. I think they're looking at them like, we should win these games. And I know rivalries, because those 2 games are rivalries, Washington and the New York Giants. However, if you're really that much of a Super Bowl contender, I think you can beat those teams, even without Ezekiel Elliott. And you certainly have to feel like you can beat those teams. And I think Jerry will go into the first few weeks of the season. Again, he said it before. That's when the leverage will really show itself. If we look bad, even if they win but can't run the football, all the leverage goes to Zeke. If they lose, and I'm not even saying let it go 2 games. If they lose to the Giants, then you go back and you give Zeke what he wants. Because I think the Gurley contract, it looks like a mistake. And they gave it to him early. Now he looks like damaged goods. And I get it, they got to the Super Bowl last year. But what are the next 4 years of Ty Gurley making $15 million or $14 million a year going to look like?
Right. Well, Gurley did have the knee injury going back to college. Now, obviously, he came out like gangbusters once he was in the pros. But he did have that knee there, so the tendonitis in it or the arthritis in it, not a total surprise. The Rams did take a risk there. I'll tell you this, though. A counterpoint also is why they should pay Zeke and get him on the field week 1. Michael Thomas, Giants safety, joked to me the other day. He goes, hey, can you tell Zeke and his agent just to wait until week 2 to get that done? Saquon Barkley told me last week, he said the Dallas Cowboys are a different team when Zeke is on the field. They're a better team when he's on the field. They would love to play the Dallas Cowboys without Ezekiel Elliott. And not to take anything away from Tony Pollard, and I know you guys have talked about him, but Darrell Henderson from Memphis was their featured back. Pollard's more of a specialist, and I know, listen, I'm saying Danny Dimes off of Danny Jones's 5 for 5, but this is the preseason. So maybe I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth there a little bit.
Exactly.
But the fact is, Pollard is not ready for this kind of workload.
Right. I do agree with you.
Yeah, so.
I completely agree with you, Pat. And the proof is in the numbers when it comes to how important Ezekiel Elliott is to this Dallas Cowboys team. When they run the ball 49% or more, the Cowboys in the Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott era are 20-0. When they run it 44% or more, they're 28-2. Now, on the other side of that coin, when they throw it 55% or more, the Cowboys are 5-16. So the reality is that if you're leaning on that run game and that offensive line to set the tone, you are a much better football team. You brought up the example about Emmitt Smith and that holdout bleeding into the regular season. I think it's a different conversation with that group because that team had championship experience already. This team, when you're talking about Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott and Amari Cooper, these guys, they haven't done it yet. So there's still a little bit of a learning curve. There isn't as much margin for error. So I think that's why the Cowboys should have more urgency about getting this Ezekiel Elliott deal done. But based on Jerry Jones' most recent comments, I can understand why Ezekiel Elliott would be so upset because it doesn't sound like they're taking the holdout seriously.
Yeah, well, with that being said, he's not the only one, as you mentioned, up for contract negotiations. Is there a significance to the fact that Jerry Jones's tone towards Dak or towards Amari is different than what we've heard or how he's reacted to Zeke?
I mean, I think there's a difference, but the difference is that Zeke's not there and those 2 guys are. So I think that's why he's treating it a little differently publicly. What's interesting, though, is the feeling I get is that the Cowboys do intend to eventually pay Dak, not $40 million, but they intend to pay him. And it surprises me that it's more positive about paying him and getting it done than Zeke, because Dallas is not winning anything if Ezekiel Elliott's not on this team. In the long run, even though I think Dak is better than most give him credit for, I think he is a replaceable player. Now, again, I'm not saying he's not a good player. I watched him carve up the Giants 380 yards and 4 touchdowns in Week 17. I was on the field when he was running around. The Giants couldn't catch him. Touchdown and 2-point conversion in the final minute. Zeke didn't even play in that game. Dallas is actually 2-0 against the Giants without Zeke, by the way, which is odd. However,
About to be 3-0.
However, their offensive line, their pass protection, everything about what they do is better and easier when Zeke is on the field. He is what you game plan for, and that is why even Amari Cooper, when he came over in the trade, that is why he and Dak were so dynamic as well. you have to pay attention to the best running back in the league. You're not just preparing for their passing game.
Pat, terrific stuff. Thanks so much for being here with us
Thanks,
this
Darren.
morning. We appreciate it. All right, coming up, are the Steelers better off without Antonio Brown? That's next on First Things
Can't measure
First.
up yet. Try it, man. Try it.
Saturday, we've got what could be a World Series preview as two of baseball's best and most iconic teams collide. Aaron Judge and the Yankees take on Cody Bellinger and the Dodgers. It's all part of doubleheader action beginning at 3 Eastern, noon Pacific on FS1 and the Fox Sports app.
My Yankees, best record in baseball. They had the night off, but they get things back started tonight. I'm excited. They got to make this push.
Been a heck of a year for him, for sure.
We'll get to Antonio Brown in a second, but first, open gym basketball, James Harden. This is a move we've never seen before. One-footed sidestep three-pointer. He'd been talking about it.
He just fascinates me. I mean, to his ball handling, to be able to get the space he gets without, incredible athleticism, and then that, if he's going to start doing that in games, one-footed three-pointers, you think? I mean, he might. Who knows? We'll see.
Cleveland Browns practice, Odell Beckham Jr., nice one-handed under one leg catch. Speaking of athleticism.
That's unbelievable. I mean, this Odell Beckham Jr. guy, there really isn't anything athletically that he can't do at a really high level. He's a special player. If he can keep the distractions to a minimum, I think he's going to be a great addition to that Cleveland Browns team.
That's bananas. That's
the
crazy.
Dude is fantastic, but the gloves. That's all
Stop it.
I'm just
Stop
saying.
it.
It's a fact.
The glove didn't have nothing to do with that one-handed catch he made against the Dallas Cowboys.
You
Stop
don't think
it.
so?
No.
Why didn't we see
No.
those types of catches
No.
15 years ago?
49ers
Come on.
Broncos last night. Kendrick Bourne, a nice double foot tap for the touchdown.
That's nice.
Yeah, that's some pretty good footwork in the corner of that end zone. That's close quarters right there, but he gets them both down. Yeah. That's great concentration. And then hanging on to the ball when he hits the ground. That's a big thing that officials have been looking for the past couple of years. He secures the football. That's a great catch.
No question. No question. And Jimmy G didn't throw it. Just saying.
You should be concerned a little bit if you're a 49ers fan about what you saw with Jimmy G.
All right, we'll get to that. I'm Sarah Kustak, and before the show moves along, here's a quick word from our friends over at the Fantasy Footballers podcast. The NFL season is back, and that means one thing. It's fantasy football time. Dominate your league by subscribing to the #1 fantasy football podcast on the planet, the Fantasy Footballers. Fantasy Footballers podcast is the most downloaded fantasy football podcast for a reason. It has the most accurate rankings as measured by fantasy pros, so you have a leg up on your competition. The Fantasy Footballers was the winner of iHeartRadio's Best Sports Podcast and have over 20 industry awards since 2015. Simply put, these guys can help you win your league, and you'll be entertained in the process. Subscribe right now to the Fantasy Footballers podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever you listen to podcasts. You can also visit them on the web at thefantasyfootballers.com. Subscribe now and dominate your fantasy football league. To the Steelers, Big Ben says Pittsburgh has something special in Juju Smith-Schuster, and he might not be wrong. Juju is just the third receiver since the merger in 1970 to post over 1,400 yards and 100 catches in his sophomore season. The other two, Larry Fitzgerald and Isaac Bruce. And with all the drama going on with Antonio Brown, with the Raiders, CB, we have to ask, are the Steelers actually better off without AB?
As great as AB is, there is no doubt in my mind they're better off without him. They didn't win a Super Bowl with him. And for the Steelers, you know this, Chris, that's what it's all about. Mm-hmm. It's not about making the playoffs, winning 12 games. It's about Super Bowls. And as great as AB is, they failed to do that. I do think they're better because I think the morale is going to be much better. We know the reports were that Antonio was upset when Juju was the offensive MVP. That resonates throughout your locker room when guys are feeling – because AB had a great year. It's not like he wasn't getting touches or anything like that, but he was unhappy that his understudy, I guess, became the man. And this is what the Steelers do. They can replace AB. We've seen it. When Plaxico left, Plaxico Burress, Hines Ward. Mm-hmm. When Hines left, Santonio Holmes. Mm-hmm. When Santonio left, Mike Wallace. Mm-hmm. When Wallace left, Antonio Brown. Now it's going to be Juju. I think James Washington is going to have a nice season as that second receiver. I don't have any question. And I got to say this, too. My respect, I've always respected him greatly. But when I watch what's going on in Oakland, my respect for Mike Tomlin just keeps growing, because it's like how many fires did he put out with AB that we never even heard of, So I think the Steelers are going to win that division and obviously make the playoffs.
No, I think that they're going to have an opportunity to compete in the division because they always do. I mean, it's them and the Baltimore Ravens in the AFC North. I do think Cleveland is on the upswing, but I would give both of those teams, kind of a leg up just because they've been there and they've done that before. Both of those coaches have championship pedigree. So, I mean, I look at this situation with the Steelers, and although I don't think they got more talented this offseason, because you are talking about the departures of Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell, I do think it's an opportunity for this team to take a step forward just because they're putting the distractions behind them. And so in listening to everything that Ben Roethlisberger has been talking about in terms of making sure that he's got good relationships with his teammates and the wide receiver group in particular, I think that bodes well for the organization because a lot of the issues that came up with this Steelers team in the past couple of years, Big Ben has been really vocal about it and to the detriment of Mike Tomlin and everybody else within that organization in terms of trying to stabilize things. So as long as Ben is not making any inflammatory comments, and if you can keep the noise to a minimum, keep things quiet, and allow this group of wide receivers to develop, I think that there's an opportunity for this Pittsburgh Steelers offense to be just as productive as they have been in the past several seasons with Antonio Brown.
You talked about the receiving core. What about the run game? What's your expectations for them coming back this season?
Well, they haven't been great running the football the past few years. I mean, I know everybody knows Le'Veon Bell and everybody saw what James Conner did last year, but they've been, middle of the road in terms of being able to run the football. I do like their offensive line. They've had a lot of continuity with that group this decade, so I do think that will help things. But in terms of leaning on James Conner in the running game, I don't know if it'll be a run-dependent offense. I still think that offense goes through Ben Roethlisberger, and I think the organization has empowered him this offseason. Remember the comments from their general manager, Kevin Colbert, when he said it's Ben and 52 kids. Now, I don't agree with that rhetoric, but you kind of get a little insight into how the organization is thinking. They're going to go as far as Ben Roethlisberger is going to take them, but it's good to see Big Ben taking a more mature approach when it comes to the leadership aspect of things.
Well, no doubt they're going through Ben, and the passing game is going to be big. But Conner, he showed last year, he's not as good as Le'Veon Bell.
No.
He just doesn't put the defense off balance the way Le'Veon did. But his numbers were pretty much as good. And I get that maybe 1,200 yards from him is different from 1,200 from Le'Veon. But he still put up very good numbers. I think they won't use him quite as much because, they don't want to get him hurt again. Mm-hmm. I think they probably make the playoffs if he stays healthy last year. So I think they're going to be definitely trying to decrease his workload to keep him healthy for the entire season. But I do think he's a very capable back. And I wouldn't be surprised. I think another guy will emerge to at least give him some, some breathing room that can help him carry the load. So I think their running game will be fine.
All right. Coming up, does Aaron Rodgers need to prove doubters wrong this season? That's next on First Things First. Back here on First Things First, and we are going viral. Tom Brady gearing up for his 20th season in the league, and with no end in sight for the 42-year-old quarterback, he still has the same enthusiasm he did when he was a rookie, which is maybe why the Patriots' official roster has Brady's age listed as 22. TB12 got a kick out of it, posting, finally, they got my age right.
That's funny right there, man. But Tom Brady, man, he's amazing. He just finds a way to put a chip on his shoulder every single year. You wouldn't think a player that's as accomplished as he is would find ways to be able to motivate himself to play at that level all the time. But he's always looking to get better, and that's why he's the greatest quarterback of all time.
No question. I'm with you on that one. And when you see him in this, what was that draft?
Can't stop looking.
Combine, you could tell he was going to be a great one. Looking at that picture.
He's got that Benjamin Button thing going. He's aging in reverse. I mean, because he definitely looks better now than that combine photo.
Yeah. I haven't seen him in his draws, but I bet he looks much better now than he did then.
Good bet. Good bet. All right, with that, time for some stories to start your morning. Zion Williamson was drafted #1 this summer and received the largest shoe deal for a rookie since LeBron James. However, some of his peers aren't buying the hype. In the NBA's annual rookie survey, only 5% of players said Zion would have the best career, tying him for 4th. His Duke teammate Cam Reddish received the most votes at 19%. So, CB, what do you make of this?
it was hugely disrespectful. And I'm not saying guys don't like Zion or it was anything personal, but they don't think, I mean, they not only picked Cam Reddish ahead of him, Ja Morant second, but DeAndre Hunter, who's going to the Hawks, they picked him ahead of Zion. So they obviously don't think his game is going to translate to the next level. I'll say this about Cam Reddish. He can handle the ball. He can shoot it. He's got good size. A lot of people, let me just put it this way. This isn't the first I've heard of this. There are some people that think he could be the best player of the three at Duke, including R.J. Barrett. But some people are concerned that why did he defer so much to Zion and R.J.? Because they didn't defer. They took over. One of you guys was going to be the man, and Cam just stood back and let those two take over. And that's a concern to some. But, you know, the rookies obviously like him.
Yeah, Sarah, I don't put too much stock in this. The NBA rookies last year said that Wendell Carter would have the most successful pro career, and nobody would say that after what we saw from Luka Doncic and Trae Young. The NBA rookies this year, they tripping. Zion Williamson is special.
On to the NFL. Zeke reportedly felt disrespected when Jerry Jones jokingly said Zeke who over the weekend. According to his agent, Zeke is also reportedly still training in Cabo. So, Canty, how much longer does this holdout last?
It shouldn't go much longer. I mean, Jerry Jones is trying to win a championship. You would like to have your best player on the field when you're attempting to do that. Pay that man his money. I know that he was in Cabo training at his agent's place, and Jerry Jones is saying Zeke who, but the reality is that's a different Dallas Cowboys team when they have number 21 versus when they don't.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I mean, obviously, Zeke, I think he's the best running back in the league. But if I were in Jerry Jones's shoes, I would be willing. I got a new hot offensive coordinator. I think he's hot, right? If I'm Jerry Jones, I think he's going to bring some stuff. All right, we're throwing more down the field. You know, we got more pre-snap motion. I like Tony Pollard, and we'll see if Alfred Morris can help him out. So I would be willing to go into that first game against the Giants, who I think if you are a Super Bowl contender, you should be able to beat the Giants even without Zeke. See how my running game looks, and then the leverage will swing one way or the other. And that's when I either get Zeke at a lower number, they hope, or I pay him what he wants.
Let's get to some on-field action. 49ers, Broncos. Jimmy Garoppolo played last night for the first time since tearing his ACL last season, and wasn't pretty. He went 1 for 6, 0 yards, and an interception. So, Canty, is this a sign of things to come for Jimmy G?
Well, I know that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch hope this isn't a sign of how Jimmy G is going to play this year. But, I mean, he looked awful last night. And this coming off of the report late last week that he threw 5 consecutive interceptions in joint practices with the Broncos. I mean, this is starting to concern me a little bit. He just did not look comfortable in the pocket last night. And you got to think that rehab with the knee, that mental aspect of it, he hasn't gotten past that hurdle yet. So it'll be interesting to see what happens early on in the season with Garoppolo.
Yeah, and you can look at the numbers and say, wow, he was horrible. But it wasn't just the numbers. Watching it, the eye test, you could just see he didn't look comfortable. He just wasn't throwing the football well at all. And I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. You know, he started last year, his first game, he didn't look very good. He threw 3 picks, I believe. And then the last 2 games before he got hurt, he had 4 touchdowns, no picks. So I think he can improve. But I am with you that this is a bit concerning. And you wonder, he was 7-0 his first 7 starts in New England and then in San Francisco, where there was no pressure.
Yeah.
Then you get the big contract. Now people are expecting a lot of you. Is the pressure getting to him? It's something to watch.
On to the Packers. Aaron Rodgers was expected to play in week 2 of the preseason, but sat out due to back tightness. This week, Green Bay will be in Canada on Thursday to face the Raiders, and Rodgers is expected to play. And while number 12 will suit up, the QB seemed annoyed that his lack of preseason action is getting more attention than other teams.
I do find it interesting that some teams get a pass this time of year. I mean, the Rams don't play anybody, and not many people talk about that fact. Now, the counter would be, well, this is a new system. I get it, but we've spent a number of practices now from May and June, and it's training camp in July, and now in August, running this stuff, running unscripted periods where he has to call the plan. I mean, I feel very comfortable in the offense, conceptually, philosophically, enunciating the plays, get us in the right formation, getting the checks within the play easily figured out. You know, I feel very comfortable with it. So if we didn't play, I'd feel great going into week 1.
All right, so CB, how much pressure is Rodgers under this season?
First of all, I love that little interview he did. I mean, he looked serious. He looked like he had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. You know, I don't appreciate everybody doubting me and us. So I like that. And he said the right things about Matt LaFleur's system. Seems like he's buying in. But there is tremendous pressure. Not the most in the league with Jimmy G. There's other quarterbacks that have more to prove. But Aaron Rodgers, there's pressure on him because, one, the firing of Mike McCarthy. True or not, most people think Aaron Rodgers was behind that or at least had a ton to do with it. Secondly, McCarthy's offense, which people felt was pedestrian by today's standards, that was an excuse for Rodgers. You know, that was a built-in excuse. Now you got Matt LaFleur, you know, a high-tech offense, if you will. You know, let's see what Aaron does in this type of system. This was the first off-season in ages that I can remember hearing a lot of question marks and doubts now about Aaron Rodgers. We've always given him the benefit of the doubt, and few people have liked him more than me over the years. However, I began to wonder, does he ad-lib a little too much? You know, does he try to make the difficult pass too much rather than just the little, you know, dink that, you know, can get you out of trouble at times? And does he, you know, not, you know, wait in the pocket long enough? Does he scramble too much? So I think I had those questions. Other people are starting to have those questions. And here's the fact. Since the middle of the 2015 season, his last 49 games, Aaron Rodgers is 24, 24, and 1. Okay, that's 500 football for a guy that many people feel is the best we've ever seen do it at this position. Winning is more of a premium now in the public eye than it's ever been. Yeah. You just said Tom Brady's the GOAT. He's the GOAT because he wins. Yes. You know, not because he's necessarily the greatest to ever throw the football. And now people are starting to say, if Aaron is really that guy, and I'm not saying he's not an all-time great, but if he's really that guy that we say he is, the best ever maybe, then why aren't you winning more? And so I do think there is a lot of pressure on him to have a strong season and get them deep into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of pressure on him to make it work with Matt LaFleur because the conversation up until last year around Aaron Rodgers was the team not doing enough to support him. It's never been a question of talent when it comes to A-Rod, but you say if you're arguably the most talented quarterback to have played the game all time, why haven't you only played in one Super Bowl? So I think that's the big question, but I think now the organization is making a concerted effort to get rid of all the excuses and try to get the best version of Aaron Rodgers. If you look at what they've been doing on the defensive side of the ball, they've been investing a lot of resources in draft picks and in free agency. This year, going out and signing Adrian Amos, the safety from the Bears, as well as Preston and Zadarius Smith, edge pass rushers. They drafted Rashawn Gary with their first of 2 first-round draft picks. They also invested in Darnell Savage, a defensive back, with their second first-round draft pick. They've been building that defense for the last couple of years to try to support Aaron Rodgers. And then, of course, on the offensive side, going out and hiring Matt LaFleur, an offensive-minded coach coming off of that Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan coaching tree. So they're trying to put Aaron Rodgers in a situation where you can get the most out of his talent. But I think there's pressure coming in this season for Aaron Rodgers to make all of those things work. I'm still a little concerned about the running game with the Green Bay Packers as well. I mean, I think they have a pedestrian group in that backfield, and then last year they had the lowest run percentage of any team in the National Football League. I think they ran it less than 33% of the time. If you look at the teams at the top of rush percentage in the National Football League, 8 of the top 10 of those teams made the playoffs last year. 9 of those 10 teams had winning records. So I think that it's important that they give Aaron Rodgers some balance, but I'm hoping that Matt LaFleur is going to bring a little bit of that. Keep in mind, he ran the ball a whole lot when he was down there in Tennessee in his 1 year as offensive coordinator with the Titans.
All right, we've got a special guest. Coming up next, take a look at who's here. 7-time Pro Bowler and Super Bowl champion, Torry Holt.
My guy.
What's up, boy?
What's going on, man? Been a long time.
Excited to have
Good to see you. Good to see
join the
you.
show after the break.
What's up, brother? How you doing? Good to see you.
Welcome back to First Things First. Before Sean McVay's high-flying Rams attack, there was the greatest show on turf, and 7-time Pro Bowl wideout Torry Holt was right in the middle of that. Torry posted over 13,000 receiving yards and 70 touchdowns in his 11-year career, and of course, winning Super Bowl 34 with the Rams. And we're lucky enough to be joined here in the studio by Torry. Torry, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
This is my guy right here.
Yeah.
I remember going down to Carter Finley Stadium and watching him do his thing with the Wolfpack. My cousin was also on that team in the 90s, so it's awesome to have him in studio today. One of the best to do it. Appreciate you coming.
Absolutely, man. I watched the show, and you guys do a hell of a job, and you've only gotten better in your post-career, so it's good to be here. And Chris, I watch you all the time as well, so
thank you.
It's good, man.
And you made a one-handed catch without those sticky gloves, too. I like that on the highlight.
Yeah, well, you know what? I was telling Brian earlier when I got here, when I was in the Pro Bowl with Chris Carter, Chris said, hey, let me take this rep, young man. So he runs down the seam, and he just snags a one-hand grab. He's just snagging a one-hand grab. So I got a great introduction to what a one-hand grab looks like watching Chris Carter.
We love it. We love it. All right, Terry, we're going to talk about your former team in the Rams who came up short in the Super Bowl to the Patriots. So will there be a hangover this year? New Rams linebacker Clay Matthews thinks the team will be fine, saying, quote, I mean, when you lose, is there still a hangover? There's just a level of talent that we should be able to put something together and do something special. I can't speak on behalf of any hangover or curse or whatever you like to call it, but this team looks primed and ready to make another run at it. So, Torry, are you buying that there won't be a Super Bowl hangover for the Rams?
Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, they will be challenged. They'll get everybody's best this year, being that they are NFC defending champions. So they'll get everybody's best for sure, but they've also retooled, too. I mean, I was out there early this month for a couple of days of training camp and watching this football team go through practice. The message is still the same from Coach Sean McVay. They got outstanding coaching. They got a lot of young players. I don't know how much you guys have watched them in preseason, but they got a lot of young defensive players that are flying around on the football field. And then Todd Gurley and Devin and Henderson, they bring over from Memphis. Jared Goff, I think, is a stud. He's going to continue to get better. So this football team will be right back in the mix. I don't know if they get back to the Super Bowl, but I think they get back to the playoffs and they make a strong run. I remember the year we won it in '99. We came back the next year. We got knocked out by New Orleans. We was trying to get back to the playoffs and get back to the show. We got knocked out by New Orleans, and then we came back the following year and played the Patriots in Super Bowl 36. So it's there for them. It's surely a lane. I think they'll win the NFC West. I think they'll win the NFC West, and then they'll get into the playoffs, and then we'll see what happens from there.
When you went to training camp, what'd you see from Todd Gurley, and are you concerned about his knee?
I'm not. I saw a guy that was very active, very excited about the season. Again, they brought in Henderson, brought Malcolm Brown back to the roster. They also have Kelly on the roster. So there's some talent there in the running back position that they can do a good job of spelling him. I think what's going to help Todd Gurley is what's going to help this Rams offense going forward is getting those tight ends more involved. Higbee and Everett. I think now Gurley doesn't have to carry the ball as much because you have some guys on the perimeter outside of the receivers that are making plays, particularly from the tight end position. So that can help him. They get Cooper Kupp back. Cooper Kupp is fantastic. He's great on third downs. They got Josh Reynolds. They got Cooks. They got Robert Woods, who does everything for that football team. So this is a team that's in good shape, but I'm not overly concerned with Todd Gurley. I dealt with knee issues, and I will say this. It is a challenge, mentally and physically, every single week to get yourself up to play and to be dealing with a knee issue. But they have a great training staff around him. I think Todd has been open and been honest with him in terms of where he is with his knee. They've been honest with him. So I think you're going to see both parties playing this together to make sure that they can get him for a full season.
Torry, you're talking about the concern with Todd Gurley's mentality. I'm concerned with the overall mentality of this football team because there is something to be said for going to the Super Bowl and then getting knocked off. Are you going to have the right mindset coming into the 2019 season? Because I know a lot of guys in the NFL think you can just pick up where you left off. It's unfinished business. But Aqib Talib spoke earlier. He spoke earlier last week, and he talked about this being a new season and having to start from scratch in terms of building the foundation for what the Rams will be in 2019. What's the messaging that Sean McVay is giving this group about last season and trying to turn the page going into 2019?
I agree with Talib. It is a new football team, a new roster. They got Greg Gaines. They don't have Sue anymore. They got Greg Gaines that they brought up from Washington who can play up and down that offensive line. You got Aaron Donald. You still got Michael Brockers. The linebacker position has improved Littleton. And then the secondary, they bring in Eric Weddle. Clay Matthews also joins this football team. These guys have made a lot of plays. And he's right, it is a new team. But I think Sean McVay's message is still the same. When I was out there, I was not shocked, but I was like, okay, this team is really going about the loss pretty doggone good. I remember when we lost, I was in the drain for a minute. It still bothers me. But to see this team and how they've responded to the loss and where they think they're going to go forward, It's unbelievable. And they got a lot of returning parts returning this year, both players and coaches, as well as the Rams brass and the personnel department. So they are on pace to get themselves back into the playoffs. They got to stay healthy. They got to create more turnovers on defense. And they obviously they got to score the football.
What do you think Sean McVay learned from coaching against Bill Belichick in the Super Bowl, but just the adjustments that the league is making?
Go with it. One thing I was, Coach Martz caught a lot of grief about, we were a throw first team. We threw the football. But we went into that game against the Patriots doing what we do. That's what I think that's what Sean McVay learned. I'm going to go into the next, when they do get back to the Super Bowl, I'm going to go into that game doing what we do. I'm not going to outthink myself, as he admitted to, and just go out and do what they do offensively. I think that's what he's learned the most out of this loss against the New England Patriots.
You mentioned Cooper Kupp and just the receiving core that Jared Goff has now as he enters his 4th season. What's your expectations for him and just the jump that he potentially now can make?
For Cooper Kupp?
For having Cooper Kupp back, but also Jared Goff.
Oh, I love Jared Goff. I think, since he's gotten to the Rams, he's just improved and gotten better. And then Sean McVay's tutelage definitely helps him. I think going forward, you'll see Jared Goff take more command, more control of this offense. He has weapons around him. I mentioned Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Josh Reynolds, Higbee, Everett. So there's tons of talent around him. And I heard you say something earlier, Cris, too, about the play-action pass. That is a huge part of their offense. So the play-action pass is going to be huge for them as well. That's why Todd Gurley needs to stay healthy for the duration of the season. But this football team, again, has the goods. They just got to go out, stay healthy, play together, and then, try to accomplish their goals. And that's to win the NFC West first and foremost, and then kind of go from there.
Torry, putting your bias for the Rams aside, you were a part of that greatest show on turf with Isaac Keem, Isaac Bruce, Marshall Faulk, Kurt Warner. What team around the NFL, what offensive unit reminds you most of what you guys were back in the early 2000s?
That's a good question. When I look at the Rams and some of the things that they do, I see some comparisons. I look at Drew Brees in New Orleans and some of the things Sean Payton creates offensively for his playmakers. He does a good job of putting his guys in position to make plays. And I thought Coach Martz was really, really good at that. It was almost like pick your poison when you played us. If you take away Marshall, you load the box and take away Marshall, then you got one-on-one on the outside with me and Isaac. And that ain't happening. Wasn't too many guys that were holding up with us on a consistent basis. That's kind of what I see when you look at New Orleans and when you look at this Rams team. They got guys that can hurt you in multiple ways, and it's not just one guy.
What do you think of, I know a lot of people, you say Rams will win the NFC West, but a lot of people are liking what Seattle looks like. What do you make of them and just expectations?
I think, Seattle has gotten better. They have a couple guys at the beginning of the season that will be suspended, particularly some of their guys on the defensive front. But I like Metcalf. Tyler Lockett now is the #1 receiver. They got a guy, Russell Wilson, that creates for everybody. They're trying to continue to improve that offensive line. So one thing about Pete Carroll's teams, they're going to compete. It doesn't matter who's on the roster. That's what I love about Pete Carroll. They're going to compete. And the Rams know that. You look at San Francisco last night, Jimmy Garoppolo got off to a bad start. He looked really rusty. He looked really rusty last night. But it's more training camp. It's more preseason games that he can kind of get back on point. But I think right now, and then Arizona with Kyler Murray, I talked to the Arizona brass, and they are like in awe of this guy. His ability to understand the defense, his ability to get the ball out quickly. His ability to make guys miss and extend plays. So they'll be better. But I still think the Rams defensively with Aaron Donald and Brockers and then Goff and Gurley and those guys on the offensive side of the ball. And then the Rams special teams is really special too.
Torry, one of the headlines that was made in the NFC West was the Seattle Seahawks making Russell Wilson the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. And looking at the economics of the quarterback position, do you think that Jared Goff is one of those guys that deserves $30+ million average annual value on a contract?
Well, some probably would say, nah, he doesn't deserve that. But right, that's where the market is.
Right. It's all
so
about
you can't blame Jared. It ain't his fault.
Yep.
What he can control is going out, playing the best ball that he can possibly play. I like the way he's actually answered the questions in terms of his contract. I'm not worried about that. My agent will get that resolved. I'm going to focus on being a good football player, a better quarterback for our team so we can get the ultimate prize, which is the Super Bowl. So I like Jared Goff and his stance that he's taken. He will continue to get better. And the money in terms of $30 a year, it's going to happen, again, because that's just where the market is set. Does Dak Prescott deserve $30 million a year?
He's going to get it.
Exactly, but he's going to get it just because that's where the market is. So Jared Goff is perfect timing for Jared Goff and Dak Prescott at this time.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Cris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolfe. So long, everybody.